to APUSH Chapter 8. Big picture on this first section will be the Commonwealth system, which is basically the idea that America is making progress and that the progress is for the betterment of the whole, even if sometimes they had to take things from individuals, such as eminent domain that we'll discuss in a little bit more detail right here. Basically, to finance mercantilistic ambitions, America needed banks. They are still following that model of selling more than you buy. They're trying to do the British model. But before the Revolution, they were farmers were dependent upon state government sponsored loans to be able to get equipment necessary for farming, and merchants typically got their loans from Britain. Well, after the Revolution, we need independence from Britain as far as financial things go as well. So there's a call basically for the National Bank, which is chartered by Alexander Hamilton, and that this is a very necessary thing for America. Now the Jeffersonians, of course, opposed the National Bank, and once they gained power, they allowed the bank's charter to run out in 1816. And in the place of the Bank of the United States, became state banks. Hundreds of state banks. Some of them weren't very good and had pretty bad loaning practices. But in the late 1800s, you would see a second bus would arrive, second Bank of the United States. But dubious banking practices by the state banks, added with agricultural problems, drop in agricultural prices, would lead to the Panic of 1819. And it really gave America its first taste of the business cycle, the fact that things were both good and bad. So, business cycle. Now, there's a changing of the guard. In New England and the Middle Atlantic states, you are seeing a lot more factory production called mills. Early factories were mills. They were run by water. The water would turn a wheel that would run the machines. But even with that, prior to 1820, most of your textiles and stuff were producing something called an outwork system. Now in the new capitalist-run market economy, rural parents and children had to work harder, because now instead of just farming, they're producing brooms and mops or whatnot in the downtime when basically they're just watching stuff grow out there. So now they are in the market economy. They have goods that they can bring to market to sell. This is a market revolution from the time period of 1793, basically up to about 1820. You have the market revolution that's going on. Capitalism in America. There's a need for better transportation infrastructure, without a doubt. None of this can happen in America if we're not able to get goods to the market. So we need better roads. So we turn to the turnpike, which you're going to pay a tax to use the roads, but you can use the roads through any time of the year. Typically back in this time period, roads in the winter were kind of closed down and you really couldn't move around very well. In the spring, when they thawed out and got all muddy, they were kind of hard to go on too. But with the turnpikes, you had really nice roads and structure, so you could get goods to market at all times. Canals were a real big deal. The production of canals, which would allow you to get big, bulky items onto a ship and get them to market. Railroads would come a little bit later, and they would have a much bigger impact than the first two. But remember that these infrastructural gains are going to come at the cost of freedom for some peoples, because they didn't want you to stand in the way of the common good, the commonwealth. So if your house was there and you didn't want to sell and they were building a canal through there, they were going to take your property from you, which isn't very democratic, but they justified it by saying that it was for the commonwealth. Okay, and remember that Supreme Court Chief Justice John Marshall, who's been around forever, he's serving that life term. He backs businesses at the expense of personal freedoms of people if they stood in the way of the Commonwealth. Now, what's going on in America right now, socially speaking, is that there's a move towards the democratic Republican culture. More freedom, more equality for everyone going on. There's a blossoming middle class in New England, and they're focusing on equality, equality, equality. They celebrate political equality and social equality. Very different than Europe. America is very different than Europe, where we don't really like that people are born into wealth and fame. So we like the old story of somebody who's a self-made man who rags the richest stories. Unfortunately, women and blacks were left out of this democratic Republican culture, but the can of worms has been opened with the revolutionary ideas of the War of Independence. So women are going to want those same rights and freedoms that men fought and died over in the Revolutionary War. There is a change in culture. Before the arranged marriages and primogeniture, those things are on the chopping block right now. What you see is a move towards something called sentimentalism, which is basically against the Enlightenment, that cold, hard logic and reason. Now it is, before it was marry this person because they had wealth or something like that, they could make your life better. Now it's marry someone because you love them. So that's a sentimentalistic idea. However, husbands are still dominating marriages, even in the sentimentalistic marriages. Republican motherhood also changes. There's an idea that mothers should forego political aspirations to be in the home, raising children as only mothers can do, giving them that love and care that maybe men lacked, but women were perfectly suited for. Really kind of just a justification to keep women out of power. The property is now being divided amongst all the children. Primogeniture is really being erased, and you'll see that fathers are leaving property to all their children. This is definitely a new age of equality, which influenced a better educational system, even though some of the farmers felt like this educational system was elitist because they needed their children to be working and farming. And in this system, they felt like it was only for the rich kids who it was a good way for them to go to school and not do any work. So farmers were really kind of against the educational system, at least in the beginning. All they worried about was the 3 R's, reading, writing, and arithmetic. That's all they cared about. Any kind of advanced schooling they were not fans of. So America begins seeking to create their own literary independence from Europe. Last thing we'll talk about in this section, they want their own American writers. They don't want to just read British stuff, and you get some people like Washington Irving who wrote Rip Van Winkle and Sleepy Hollow. Okay, thanks.